Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ConnectALL product demo webinar. My name is Soumya Menon, and I head marketing communications at ConnectALL, and I'll be your moderator for today. We have two experts on this webinar panel and who would demonstrate the integration between qTest and Jama Software. I'm pleased to introduce you to Joe Schultz, our AVP Emerging Technologies, and Doug Bass, our Principal Enterprise Architect. Joe will take you through the value of integrating qTest and Jama Software and why we do what we do. And Doug will demonstrate the integration on the ConnectALL platform and how it sits in the background while all the information between the two applications sync seamlessly. So before we get started, I'm just going to run through some housekeeping points. Firstly, today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session, and we will send the link to you afterwards. Next, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. So if you have any questions, please type them in the GoToWebinar control panel, and we will bring it up after the presentation. And lastly, we'd like to encourage you to share today's webinar with your social networks and work communities. So without further ado, I'm handing it over now to Joe.
Okay, well, thank you, Soumya, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Glad you could attend. Today, we're going to talk about how to scale your Agile practices, and specifically, we're going to talk about integration between Tricentis qTest and Jama Software. With me, as Soumya said, is Doug Bass. We're lucky to have him today. He's one of the original architects of ConnectALL and probably the most skilled technician we have in the company. So I'm happy to have him do the heavy lifting today. But before we jump into that, I'm going to talk for just a few minutes about the connected tool chain. What I mean by that is, why we need to consider these things and how ConnectALL can help you solve some of those problems that I'll discuss. And then Doug will jump into the demonstration and actually show you a live working example of using ConnectALL in this Agile practice delivery method. Okay, so as you guys know, as everyone on the phone knows, work exists in many places today. Things come in from all over the place, and we have to build software. All of us are in software delivery. We have to build software to solve problems. And those problems can be the result of customer requests. They can be the result of previous engineered defects. They could be the result of industry requirements that we have to fulfill. Well, lots of different places that this work comes in, and potentially lots of places that this work happens as well. Development teams today are spread all across the world in a variety of different tools. So on the screen, I've got just a sample of some of the places that work might be happening in your organization. You have on the left-hand side, specification or customer-facing kinds of tools. On the right-hand side, development kinds of tools for delivering software. And the challenge in most companies is linking them together, creating what we call a connected tool chain, where information isn't lost anywhere in the process, and we can track the reason that we're doing things. Keep track of why we're building particular features in the product or defects we're trying to solve. So that's the challenge that most people face today, is integrating this wide variety of tooling that they currently use. In addition, we all know that there's a lot of different steps in the process. Now, you could draw this picture any way you want. I've seen people draw it as waterfalls. I've seen people draw it as iterative circles. I've seen people draw it as triangles. It really doesn't matter how you draw your life cycle and how you attack this, whether it's a small iterative Agile type method, or whether it's a big waterfall step down method, or a combination with a Kanban approach, or whatever it might be. The point is, there are several tasks you have to perform, all the way from defining your initial target, defining your requirements, or user stories, or epics, or whatever they might be called, all the way through delivering that code so that people can run it and get value out of it. And lately, I say lately, meaning the last 10 years, really, we as an industry have been focusing on the back half of that. So a lot of the practices, a lot of the tooling today, and a lot of the automation that people are using and buying is focused around making us develop software faster, which is great, right? I mean, we're moving fastly, we're developing quickly. And the point, though, is what we're doing is we're looking at the code that we need to deliver. And we're testing then that code that we delivered. And we do that in an agile kind of scaled method, primarily focused at the task level. So, developer writes some feature into the product and we test to make sure that that feature works the way it was intended, which is great. But what happens often is in that rush to get to code, we lose the voice of the customer. The customer is the one who said, I need to do something. So when we test, we want to test not just what the developer delivered, but we actually want to test against what the customer wanted in the first place. And those are often two very different things. I mean, if any of you have ever played the game of telephone when you were growing up, I mean, you know how a message can become garbled through each translation. So a customer may have made a request, but by the time it goes through all of our engineering cycles and ends up in lines of code, we could actually be doing the wrong thing unintentionally, but could be the wrong thing. So what we really need to do is make sure we create traceability between that defined design step, the requirements, the user stories, and the delivered code. We need to test not only the code, which we already do, but we need to test the design as well. And it's that link today that Doug and I are going to show you an example of. Now, of course, I always have to throw a story in. One of the most famous examples of this, I'm sure you guys have probably already heard this before, is the Mars Climate Orbiter. This was a $125 million satellite. Took years to develop, and it burned up 40 seconds into entry into the Mars atmosphere. And after a couple of years of analysis and post-mortem discussions and all that kind of stuff, they determined that the problem was that the requirements, in this particular case, one team was using metric units and the other was using English units. So they were sending information, they were sending commands to the thrusters, and the thrusters were receiving the wrong unit type and actually thrusting at the wrong power level. And that's what caused the satellite to get too close and come in too fast. And so this was a simple requirements error. I mean, somewhere along the line, we lost track of what needed to happen, how the requirements were specified, and no one tested against that requirement before the satellite was deployed. Now, I would hope that in your case, your mistakes and your problems are not quite so big or quite so fatal. In this case, we lost an entire satellite and its payload package. But nevertheless, it's the same principle. You need to track your requirements and make sure that you're testing not just what the developer delivered, but also what the customer wanted in the first place. And that's where ConnectALL comes in. It helps you solve these kinds of problems. Among other things we can do, that design to test integration is one thing that we can focus on. Now, the way that ConnectALL works in general is that it's a standalone integration package. So you install ConnectALL somewhere, and then you connect it up, you point it at your delivery tools, whatever that be. Everything from customer idea inception all the way through delivery. On the screen is just a smattering of the tools we support, kind of a sample of some of the most popular ones. And so we can tie requirements to design, we can tie design to coding, we can tie coding to test, or any combination thereof. We can talk to CRM tools and project management tools, and even internally developed applications and databases. So there's a lot of things ConnectALL can tie up. Today, what we're going to focus on, as I've said, is that design to test integration, and specifically, we're going to use Jama Software as our design example, and we're going to use Tricentis qTest as our testing example. Here's the complete list of things ConnectALL can connect to then. I mentioned it was a big list, and these are the named integrations. And you'll notice we also have a couple of custom integrations as well, custom adapters, so we can talk to virtually everything. example you're going to see today, in fact, mixes and matches these. So we're going to use our Jama Software adapter, which is an out-of-the-box, full-function supported adapter. And then we're also going to use a custom adapter that Doug actually put together, which is specifically written for qTest. It's available to everyone who uses ConnectALL from our community portal. So we have a community section where anyone can contribute to additional adapters and things like that. And we have a selection of those available as well. So just as an example, Doug's going to show you a couple of those, one named adapter and one custom one. And he'll talk a little bit about the difference between them. And so that brings us back to what we're going to do today. As I said, we want to focus on this connected tool chain. We're just going to show you one piece of this, but of course you could extrapolate this and understand how this would work across the entire application lifecycle. In this example, we're going to show you how your great idea gets identified in your planning environment. So something happens either in your planning environment or in your development environments, and we can synchronize then those ideas or defect reports in both directions. So we can take information from one tool and move it to another. Today, what Doug's going to show you is the Jama Software to qTest integration. And so, for example, we'll take defect information that's in qTest and synchronize it into Jama Software so that it can be added into the plan, and everyone on both sides of the equation is kept completely up to date with the latest and greatest information. So that's what we'll show you today. Again, it's just one piece of what ConnectALL can do. You can apply that model then throughout the entire development lifecycle. And so without further ado, I'll introduce Doug Bass and let Doug take over the presentation here. Let me make Doug the presenter. And then take it away, Doug.
Thank you for that great introduction and that great example. That was really interesting about the Mars satellite. I never realized that, but it is kind of interesting of how sometimes requirements or design or sort of lose the end goal sometimes. What is it, the alligators and the draining the lake scenario? But anyway, what I wanted to show you today is just one small component of this integrated tool chain. And that's what would happen. The normal scenario would be, of course, you go through and you create your requirements and your design. Your testers would be creating test cases. And then as code is available, those testers would, as they run their test cases, God forbid if they happen to fail, you want to communicate back to your developers, your engineering, and this test has failed. And typically when you do that, you might include, screenshots, log files, a description of what basically failed. And then when it goes back to the developers engineering, they could then collaborate with the testers about what the failure was and do they understand it? They need additional information. So that's what a lot of this integration is about the collaboration. Like we were talking about the requirements. You want to collaborate on the requirements, make sure everybody understands, make sure your design and your test cases fulfill those requirements, what we all call traceability in the industry. So from the perspective of how you would actually do this, how you would communicate these cases, if you don't have a tool like ConnectALL in place, you're probably doing this manually, maybe phone call or meetings or reports. When defects come up, then you have a meeting with your engineering team, and this failed and that failed, and what are we going to do? How are we going to solve it? And you have long conversations of, do I understand it or do I not understand it? So the whole idea with ConnectALL is to more immediately communicate that information and more immediately collaborate, and hopefully also more immediately resolve whatever problems may have been found during that test case. So on your screen, you can see what ConnectALL looks like once you install it. It has a home page where you can create as many integrations as you want. As Joe was mentioning, we support 40 or so applications out of the box between Microsoft and IBM and HP, a lot of different products, Salesforce, ServiceNow, as well as the concept that an end user or customer could develop their own custom integration. And that's what I'm going to show you today. And after I show you, I'll talk a little bit about that, what that is and how that worked. But basically, to set this up, you would select the two ends of the applications, give that some name. That's what we call an application link. And then if I could show you this, then we would go in and we would start mapping and basically designing and deciding what data we want to synchronize between applications. At the highest level, of course, what servers we want to communicate, what projects, and at the very lowest level, what fields we want to synchronize. And there's a lot of setup that we can do. I'm not going to go through today. What fields, how we map the fields, what special processing and scripting we can do if the out-of-the-box integrations aren't sophisticated. So there's a lot of things that we can do within the application and outside of the application. From the perspective of using a custom adapter, in other words, we have 40 some adapters out of the box that we sell, but say you have a custom application, some application you want to integrate with, and as long as there's a way to communicate with that new application, a REST API or database or whatever, then there's a way to get that information over into ConnectALL and through the system. So just as an example of that, I created a custom adapter for qTest, and then I'm going to use our standard adapter that exists over in Jama. So here's our Jama, and here's our qTest. So it's simple as I'm going to create a new defect, and let's say the door is open. I don't know, some really simple little test case. And we're going to save that. So then the idea would be that a tester ran a test case. As a result, the test failed. They created a defect, and then they want to get back that back to engineering. So here's where the factor of the custom integration or the custom adapter comes in. In a minute, I'll show you, I'll talk a little bit about how this works. But basically, this example is two scripts. One script, this one, looks for change data in qTest, and it sends that change data over to Jama. Really simple, really straightforward. Why couldn't we have written this directly without using ConnectALL? We could have. We could have communicated directly with Jama, directly with qTest to do this. In fact, a customer can do that themselves. But there's a lot of advantages of using ConnectALL as the central data hub in order to communicate that. We were looking at some of the details, like some of the mappings that can be done between projects and fields and sophisticated transformations of data. All of that can be done when we're leveraging what's available in ConnectALL instead of communicating directly with the applications. Also, when you're using the adapters available from ConnectALL, we're keeping up with the releases of those adapters. So when Jama comes up with a new release, we'll retest that, re-verify that adapter, and release that. So again, it's reducing the amount of work that you as the end customer has to do to keep your integrations up to date and functional. So after a little while, or actually pretty quickly, that test case that I created, that defect that I created gets pushed over to Jama. And then once it's over on Java, you can make an equivalent change over, here as a developer, I see the bug that was created, and maybe I want to collaborate via comments or change some field like status or priority. And I'm going to just make a simple little change here to demonstrate what would happen if the developer made some change to this issue in an attempt to communicate back and forth. So then again, we would have a script. And remember, these scripts are, they would be automated in a real production system. Instead of running the script manually, you would run them as a cron job. Of course, if they were standard adapters supported by ConnectALL, all that polling, every minute or so is built into the ConnectALL application. So now I'm going to run a script. It's going to actually go out to Jama, look for changes that were in Jama, and it's going to send those changes back to qTest. So that's basically how this communication works back and forth, that we can communicate that information. What I wanted to talk a little bit about, I have a few more minutes, is talk about what's going on and how this works. So as we were saying, we have this central data hub called ConnectALL, and then we have all these applications that are connected to ConnectALL, and we've written either a standard adapter, which is a means of communicating with each of these applications, or maybe we wrote a custom adapter that communicates here. If we were communicating with qTest with that custom adapter, and maybe this was the Jama adapter. So my little script made a query to qTest, sent that data to ConnectALL, and then ConnectALL did the mapping transformation, and then sent the data out to Jama. So that's basically how that works. And then from the perspective of writing your adapter, what you have is that, say, here's your ConnectALL application. And again, here you have this standard adapter that's going to talk to a Jama. So now we need to develop this custom adapter that has the capability to talk to some other application, like in our example, qTest. So this example of this adapter is really broken into two parts. It needs to be able to read the data from qTest and send that data to ConnectALL, and then it's ConnectALL's job to send it out to some endpoint. So this piece of code that I wrote here, it doesn't know what that other, or care what that other endpoint was. It could have sent it out to ServiceNow or Salesforce or anything else. That's what our mapping here in ConnectALL determined what the other endpoint is, where this data is going to end up at. So this is one script I wrote that found the data in qTest that changed since our last transfer, and sent that to the data hub in ConnectALL, and it sent it out. And then the other script that you saw me run, it actually communicated with the ConnectALL data hub and said, give me the data that's changed over in this remote application, and then I'll take that data and send it back to qTest. So as you can see, there's really, in each of these scripts, there's two components, actually three components. The two communication ends to communicate with ConnectALL and our custom application, and also a little piece of code that transfers the data. So the data coming from qTest is in some format, X, and when we need to send the data over to ConnectALL, ConnectALL assumes that data is in format Y. So again, our standard adapters do all this work automatically behind the scenes, which is what's really nice about when we develop and deploy standard adapters. If you as a customer would create this custom adapter, this is basically the functionality that you need to be able to provide the communications in those two applications, and just the field transformation, a really simple field transformation. So that's the basic gist of how you would use a custom adapter or a standard adapter to transfer information between systems. And what we've done, ConnectALL has created a community portal over on GitHub, ConnectALL-community. And we've already uploaded several of these custom adapters that we've developed. Jenkins is one, qTest is another. We'll continue to develop these, but the objective is that the community, once we advertise this broadly, which will be happening soon, we want the community to start either using and evaluating and extending these adapters, these custom adapters we've provided to the community. We'd also like the community to be creating their own adapters and upload them so other customers could use those. Some of the other community projects that we've been working on is a Docker installation, single node, multiple node, different ways of setting up and using other tools and applications. We also have some transformation scripts that we're getting ready to load up here that can be used to do more advanced transformations at runtime that's installed on your ConnectALL server. So soon you'll be seeing those. So this is our hub. Please collaborate with us. If you try these out and you have some problems, please create issues. We can create an entire marketplace and a place for all of our customers to collaborate with their successes and challenges. So that's the end of my presentation. Next would be if there would be any questions. So I'm going to pass the presentation back to Joe, if you would take it on.
Okay. Well, thanks, Doug. I appreciate the demonstration. There's a lot of value in creating those custom connectors, and that's something that people ask about all the time. So I'm glad to see an example of that. And so now we'll turn it over to Soumya. Did we have any questions from the audience, Soumya?
We definitely do. So the first one is for you, Joe. So you talked about connecting the tool chain. Is it possible to connect multiple tools together so that 3 or 4 are kept in sync with each other?
That's a good question, and that's actually a very real use case for most people. A lot of times you have, for example, information coming in a customer portal, something like Salesforce or ServiceNow, and you want to move that into your design tool, like we've been using Jama Software in this example, and then that needs to bridge into, let's say, Azure DevOps for development, and we want to bridge that same information into qTest for test traceability. So, I mean, there's an example right there of, say, 4 tools in a chain. And ConnectALL can absolutely do that. So we can connect any combination of tools using any combination of custom and standard adapters in order to build a complex tool chain that keeps all of them in sync. Now, of course, having said all that, you wouldn't synchronize every piece of information across every tool. It doesn't make sense because people don't need everything. So you would decide as a customer, when you install ConnectALL and when you configure it, you would decide which things make sense to go which directions, and based on your use case, your workflow. So it's very easy to install ConnectALL, hook up multiple endpoints, make these configurations all graphically through the UI to decide which data goes where and who's the master and things like that. So it's pretty easy to configure.
Okay, thank you so much. There's a question here for Doug. Doug, is there a cost associated with leveraging the one of these custom scripts between tools?
There is a nominal cost, a licensing cost associated with that. Your sales organization can help you with that. It's certainly much less than the cost of, say, a doors adapter, but there is a nominal cost associated.
Okay, thank you. A couple more questions for you, Doug. One of which you've answered already about creating custom adapters, but I would like you to answer it again if anyone has missed listening to that bit. So the question is, can I create my own custom adapters?
Right, so that's the whole idea of, actually this was the whole idea when ConnectALL was first designed, is we went to a customer and they had all these custom applications in-house, and they wanted a way of connecting them so that work could be done more efficiently. And as a result of that, we developed ConnectALL specifically with the purpose of supporting custom adapters from the very beginning. In order to implement that we've created a REST API, several versions of that REST API, a very straightforward version, which is what I used here, and a more complex, more complete version called callbacks, which is also available. And all of that is documented on our website under our adapter page. There's a page for our custom adapters. Feel free to look at that. And also a very, of course, a good way of documenting how an adapter works is actually seeing the source code. So that's the objective with the community portal, is to put some examples of a custom adapter on the portal so that after they've looked at the documentation, well, what does it really look like and what does it really have to do? The code on the portal really demonstrates very well.
Okay. One more question and we'll wrap up. Do we have an adapter for Tricentis Tosca?
That is under development. That will be available sometime later, but it is currently under development. Yes, that is in the works.
Okay. That's all the time we have on this webinar. So if you have more questions, do contact us and we will get back to you. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Joe. And thank you all for joining this session. Our September webinar will demonstrate Jira and ServiceNow integration. So to visit our website and sign up for it if that interests you. Thank you so much.